Hi, I'm Shane.
And I'm Alex.
This is the RPM podcast.
And welcome to another post-race discussion at the historic track of Imola this week. And we had quite a few ups and downs, nice bit of drama in this race that will be going around. The first thing, though, before we get to our discussions, as always, let's take a look at our view from the stands. We always ask for your comments and questions at the end of the race, and we've got a couple this time. The first one is from Bryant Hernandez, who contacted us again. Thanks for your question. He asks, how long will the Silver Arrows era last? Will the new regulations even the playing field for 2022 and beyond?
Oh, that's a tough one. Well, is it? I'm going to take the lead. I believe that 2021 will probably be a Silver Arrows era as well. I think they'll do very well considering they've already started development on that car. 2022, it's a clean slate. Obviously, budget caps are introduced, hard budget caps, default parts or parts which you have to publish towards the start of the season, obviously making it easier for other teams to, catch up or close the gap. Standardized parts, that's what I was talking about. So 2022 is a real hard reset for the sport. I think it's anyone's game. You just look back through, the last 20, 30 years when there's been a change in era. Look at Red Bull and then Mercedes. They just flipped the switch. And obviously Red Bull are still very competitive, but suddenly Mercedes, who weren't very competitive, have jumped up and have won 7 world championships, constructed 1 world championship. So anything can happen in 2022. I'm hoping it will be a bit of a mix-up. It would be quite refreshing for the sport, having all teams fight for the win. What say you, Alex?
Yeah, I think that 22 is the best chance we've got of a reset, like you say. Let's not forget that when we're looking that far ahead, we could be seeing a Mercedes without Toto Wolff. We could be seeing a Mercedes without Lewis Hamilton.
Big changes.
Because he's been talking about there's no guarantee of him being in the sport even next year. I think that he will be, but 2022 and beyond, I don't know if he necessarily will. So we could be seeing a very different Mercedes, and all of the factors you mentioned hopefully will bring in a lot of the rising teams that we see, like Renault and what will be Aston Martin and McLaren, hopefully, fingers crossed, will also be in the contention for a title. So it'll be fantastic if all of those teams can develop together and we have a potentially, 4 or 5 team fight for the championship.
Blimey, can you imagine? Yeah, one can dream. Speaking of which, I'm going to add onto that bit of Lewis and Toto. I see them as like a bit of a package deal. I feel like if one of them leaves the team, I feel like the other one will. And Toto's reflected on lockdown this year and the global pandemic we're currently experiencing. And he said how much he's missed his family and realized how much time he's spent away from his family. Because Formula One, especially for all the teams involved, traveling from country to country is such a demanding lifestyle. It's not all luxury like the drivers, like some of the drivers live. The teams behind them have to travel the world, set up, do crazy things to get, the races happening and get the cars on the grid. I think that's really reflected on the teams this year. And Toto said it's finally come to light. He's seen what he's missed at home. And I do think if
sense
Toto,
that he would want to leave when they're on a high as well.
Absolutely.
They want to leave when they're
without a doubt.
Do a Rosberg, basically.
Yeah, do a Rosberg, but after seven constructor championships. So
yeah, not after one.
I would probably say that Toto would leave. He might leave at the end of this year. And I honestly think Lewis, if Toto leaves at the end of this year, I think Lewis would follow suit. And it'd almost be a bit too perfect. It would Lewis equals Michael Schumacher's record of 7 world championships, and then wouldn't want to beat it, but just equals it. I think that's quite a nice way to end the sport. You don't have to beat everyone. I mean, he's in a class of his own. He could probably go on for a couple of years, but maybe he's got other things to do in his life. Who knows? But I think that's a package deal, and I think as soon as one of them goes, the other one will follow suit.
And that brings us nicely to our next question from regular contactee and fan of the show, Dave Doherty, who asks whether we think that Lewis is going to equal Schumacher's title, his 7th title. He says that the writing is on the wall, and I thoroughly agree. I can't see any conceivable way that Lewis Hamilton won't equal that record. There's never really been any doubt. And I think you're right. I think it's possible that he could just equal it, because in order to go further, I suppose next year, we've already mentioned that it's not going to be all changed next year. It's the season after that. Don't know. Maybe he will try and go one more. It's very hard to tell at this stage.
Yeah.
But as for a 7th title, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems unlike that ridiculous report by that company that tried to claim that they had a 99.9% accuracy of Checo Perez joining Red Bull, which was absolutely hilarious, and I recommend you check out just for a good laugh.
Yep. 99.9% that was.
Yeah, I think 99.9% is the actual certainty of Hamilton winning the championship for the 7th time. So
without a doubt, I believe he can win it next week. I don't know what the not next week, the week after. I don't know what the calculations are, but I believe if Bottas doesn't finish the race and Lewis does his usual P1, I believe it's in the bag, which is crazy considering I think there's 4 races left. Mm-hmm. There might be 5,
4 or 5,
4 or 5, which is
I think it's 5,
ridiculous.
Actually.
And in such a short season as well, because I know we've crammed in a lot of races this year, but it's been a lot shorter than your traditional calendar to still win it 4 or 5 races before the end. Incredible stuff. But we'll get on to the championship standings and the driver standings later on in the podcast. But thank you very much, Dave. I completely agree with Alex. Don't have anything else to say apart from it's a done deal, really. Might as well give him the trophy now, start engraving his name. Gets a couple of duplicates made for the cabinets. It's a done deal. And the guy deserves it. He's been flawless this season, more so than other seasons. And honestly, I don't want to go off on a tangent again, but Lewis's driving style and, consistency improves race on race, year on year. So there's no reason why he shouldn't stay in the sport. He couldn't stay in the sport. There's absolutely no doubt about it that if he wanted to and had the equipment to do so, 8, 9, 10 world championships.
He could just keep going.
We're only talking about 3 years. He's done 6 in the last 7 years. It's ridiculous. It's incredible. There's no doubt about it that guy is talented and he could take it so much further than he could want to. It's amazing.
Thanks very much for all your questions. Keep them coming in. You can always contact us at RacePerMinute on Twitter or email us info@raceperminute.com.
Absolutely. And if you want to send in a voice message or record yourself, video or audio, so we can react to it on the podcast, then by all means do so. You can send it to us again on Twitter or via email. Either way, we're quite happy to receive anything. So, moving on to the race discussion, and we will be starting with, was we talk about practice? Because it was a slightly unusual week this week, wasn't it? The fact that there was no
Friday running.
No Friday running. And I was off Saturday, which was quite nice. Can't say the same about Sunday, unfortunately. But I managed to watch the practice session, hour and a half of 20 cars flying around the track. It's quite exciting. I really enjoyed it. There was some interesting strategies going on, because usually you have 2 sessions on the Friday to get your long runs, get your short runs, get your qualifying pace kind of ironed out. But you had an hour and a half on a Saturday and every team was very busy.
I think it's a good way to run proceedings. We've spoken before about whether or not we should get rid of Friday practice. And I think both of us were generally quite favourable towards the idea just because it introduces more uncertainty. This showed that it did mean that teams had to get more preparation into a shorter period of time. And it also showed in the race result that experience as a driver in general was key to putting in a good performance, as we saw from Hamilton and we saw from Raikkonen and Vettel as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And so a lot of the more experienced drivers were able to put in those good performances on an unfamiliar track. I think we spoiled last week that Raikkonen's the only driver who's actually been on this track of the entire grid. And so I think it was important in a way to have an even greater level of uncertainty going into this race, because there was a risk that the race could be a little procedural, and Hamilton warned of this.
He did straight after. Was it qualifying? It was, yeah. He was. He did say, "I fear the race will be a little bit boring."
Yeah, because the track is so narrow in so many places, and there's not a lot of overtaking opportunities. So I think it was good that they had that limited running before qualifying, and I didn't really see much of it myself, but what I did see, like you say, it looked pretty exciting, trying to get them to cram all of that testing in one little phase.
Absolutely. Sky Sports, interestingly, made comments on just the Saturday running, like they would do. They take a little bit of news and they run with it for hours and hours on end. But
yeah,
obviously, I think I think a lot of us as fans would quite like the idea of just seeing a Saturday running because it really throws up scenarios in the race when you've got limited run time, especially if a Saturday morning was raining and the race was dry. Imagine that. That would be crazy. But it also takes away a Friday from fans who can't afford to pay, the hundreds of pounds or hundreds of their local currency for a race day or qualifying. And actually Friday's the cheaper day. And actually Friday, you probably get to see more cars on track because you've got 2 practice sessions. Might be able to walk around the whole track like you can do at Silverstone. You can just walk around the perimeter, have a look at different corners. And sometimes it's only accessible on a Friday. So I can see it from both ends. Sky Sports mentioned that actually maybe some tracks which we go to which don't have a huge crowd gathering on a Friday, why don't we scrap that and then just run on Saturday and Sunday? But your Monacos, your Monzas and your Silverstones, where there's a huge gathering on a Friday, run a 3-day session. So run a 3-day weekend. So potentially moving forward, it might be that some races are 3-day weekends and some races are 2-day weekends. I'll be quite happily have that happy medium. So fans are happy and fans who go to the track are happy.
I think you're right. There can be a sort of balance struck there, I think.
Absolutely.
And it's a good point that, Friday is important for people who want to get a view of it if they don't necessarily... going to a Formula 1 race is very expensive. And being able to come in on the Friday where it's quieter and you can just wander around the track, it's a bit more leisurely.
And it's a full day experience. Like, I know you got support races and etc., but you go on a Friday, you could turn up at 8 a.m. and you go home at 8 p.m. and you get a whole 12 hours there. There'll be a couple of support races, but normally you get to go in and out of not necessarily the paddock, but you get to see drivers walk up and down, have a chat to them. You've got autograph sessions. That all happens on like a Friday. So, there's pros and cons, and I can see them both. So I'll happily support either way moving forward. But yeah, Saturday morning was the normal practice session, and then we move on to qualifying. And quite a short lap, wasn't it? Quite a short lap. I think it was 1:14 I saw hit the timing boards at one point, and I thought, actually, 20 cars going around. It's a car every 4 seconds. It's quite a tight lap, and it's quite a narrow track, like you said, so not much room for error. One of my favourite things, if I may add, track extending. Or track limits, may I add. Sorry, we're not playing the video game. Track limits. I think there was a lot of laps cancelled and almost caught out a couple of drivers, a couple of high-profile drivers. Bottas only had 2 minutes left of Q1 to get a time set because the first 2 laps he had set, or the first lap he had set, I don't think Mercedes need to set more than 2 laps in Q1, got cancelled or got disqualified or redacted because he track extended by a foot, which I found very interesting. Track limits has been a big talking point this year. Some tracks have it, other tracks just do whatever you want.
Yeah, they were sort of only monitoring it a few corners. There was definitely turn 9.
Turn 9 and 14, I think.
Yeah, I think it must have been what was going on just in the Ravazzas. But they were trying to balance it out by having gravel traps in some places and then monitoring others, and it was a little bit convoluted. Like you can only go over the white line here, but you can go over the Italian flag here. And I think a couple of drivers got frustrated at sort of thinking that they should have been able to just go for it and just maintain the gravel trap situation.
Absolutely. That's old school, isn't it?
I've said before. Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I have said before that I do think that they should try and enforce the track limits, because if you're getting laps in with your car basically off the track, you're not really racing the track.
Well, it's not on the tarmac, is it? You can't set a new lap record if at some point during this lap you've taken all 4 wheels off the black stuff. And having one on is acceptable because you're pushing the limits of the track, you're using the track. But if you go all 4 wheels off the track, can you set a new lap record? Because you haven't adhered to the track, you haven't actually stuck to the track. And
you're not on the track that you're supposed to be setting a record.
You're creating a new track. If you're taking a corner 10 kilometers or 10 miles per hour quicker because you've gone off the track afterwards, that's not the track.
Yeah.
Just put concrete barriers all the way around.
It is kind of it's different if you've got like a wall there, but it's a symptom of the modern cars as well, because they have so much downforce and they're so quick that you really can throw yourself into the corners.
And
you can go out wide and still be okay. You can just stick to the track and force your way through.
And most cars ride those curbs really well.
Yeah.
It doesn't really throw them at all. Like we watched qualifying together, Alex, and you commented when we were watching that a Lewis's hot lap or one of Lewis's laps. So that Mercedes is so planted. It's got only a couple of inches on the tarmac, and it's going across like a sausage curb, or it's going across like the Italian flag. It's like they drop down a couple of inches every 2 inches. It drops down like an inch. The rumble strips basically, and it goes in a straight line, and it doesn't lose speed. It just goes. It's on rails. I think you described it as, and it really is. It was a really good lap to watch. But there again,
it doesn't sort of seem to struggle at all. And
at all.
We saw like slow-mo videos of the Mercedes going over and sort of having a bit of a bump, but looking fairly stable. And then there was a video of, I think, Vettel going over one of the curbs, and there's bits and pieces flying off the car as he does it.
Yes, and the rear of his car was falling. Those black bits of carbon fiber just pinging off of the back of his car. I was like, well, I wonder what car he'd rather be in. But
he lost a few more bits of his car later on that ended up collected by a Mercedes. So
yeah, maybe they're research and development purposes. Although I'm sure Ferrari would rather collect a Mercedes front wing and take that back to the factory and go, right, what do we do with this? Rather than the other way around. Mercedes probably just chucked it back into the Ferrari garage. But it was quite a significant bit, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was quite a significant little chunk. I mean, I was going to say that when that bit of Vettel's car got stuck on Bottas's car, it's probably the fastest a piece of Ferrari went all weekend.
Oh, blimey, throwing shade at the matter, but very true. Yeah, not a brilliant third Italian Grand Prix for the Ferrari outfit. Third and final Italian Grand Prix, thankfully for that team. Hopefully next year will be much better. But apart from the obvious in qualifying and how overpowered the Mercedes were and how amazing it was to watch, Charles Leclerc did very good to get the car where it was. Gasly started P4, I believe. Doing this from memory now.
What incredible! Equals his best start, I think.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. The guy is having a fantastic season. Has he confirmed for AlphaTauri next year?
Yeah, he's confirmed in that seat.
He's just, I'm really glad that's he's picked
Ricciardo
himself up
as well.
Yeah, Ricciardo, absolutely. Yeah, some really good drivers. McLaren a little bit further down the grid than I would particularly like. And Vettel out in Q2, out qualified by Russell.
Yeah.
Strange times for Ferrari and Sebastian, but here's hoping it gets better next year. But anything else, Alex?
Stroll's got to be disappointed as well. Only just about managing to get into Q2,
especially when Perez is doing so well in that seat. And it's almost like since Stroll's been confirmed for next year, he's kind of just dropped off the radar. It's been a bit unfortunate.
Yeah, well, I guess we can cover more of this once we get into the actual race itself. Obviously, just to finish up what we're saying about qualifying, Bottas, quickest in all 3 sessions. This was actually a dominant Saturday. He got pole, but he was also quickest in Q1, 2, and 3. It was a dominant Saturday for Bottas. And this was after Hamilton had been quicker in practice. This was great stuff from Bottas. He did really well. But unfortunately, he didn't convert into a victory.
No, unfortunately not. But we'll get onto that in the race because it wasn't necessarily his fault. Picked up a fair bit of damage, which was apparent after the race. And also got just unlucky with the safety car. Was it a safety car? It was, wasn't it? I can't remember. Was it virtual or was it a full safety car?
It was a VSC that certainly Hamilton was very lucky with.
Took the pit stop time from 25 seconds down to like 17 seconds, which obviously played in Hamilton's favour. But racing's racing. You got to take those chances.
Let's go from lights out then. So we kick off straight with Verstappen managing to get past Hamilton.
Yes,
at the beginning because Hamilton suffered from a bit of wheel spin coming out. Verstappen got a much better start, was able to get through. Albon had a pretty poor start by comparison, looking at the other Red Bull. But otherwise, there wasn't a lot of moving and shaking right at the very beginning. I think Gasly lost out to Ricciardo on the opening lap.
Yeah.
Despite generally having a good start, and he was looking very racy with the top 3 as they came into turn 1. So he had generally a good start, but I think he was trying to push in to get into position to make an overtake and went a bit wide. That was Ricciardo's opportunity to go through.
Yeah, it was a little bit. Go carry on.
Leclerc also got past Albon on the first lap.
Yeah, Albon
so a few
going
minor
backwards.
overtakes.
unfortunately. He had a good qualifying session. He started P5 or P6.
He was,
so started P6, which wasn't too bad. Actually, we discussed this when we were watching it. It's exactly where he wants to be. Maybe, fifth would be ideal, but he was in the top three teams, which is exactly what we want from him.
It's much closer where he should be.
Yeah, so went into the race with a little bit more of a positive mental attitude. Unfortunately, lost a couple of places on the opening lap, but you can't criticize a guy for losing places on the opening lap because Lewis Hamilton did, and no one bashes Hamilton for losing a place.
No one's immune to losing places on the first lap.
And we'll get on to how fans react. I've got a bit of a not a speech, but a bit of a segment I want to make. With Russell and his mishap and comparing it to other drivers. But yeah, it was an interesting first lap. Lots of attempts, lots of people going wide. A couple of dipped into the gravel trap.
Incident with Vettel, didn't he?
I didn't realise it was with Vettel to begin with. But yeah, Vettel was on the inside, clipped his rear left with Vettel's front right wing, and Vettel seemingly had damage and sent Kevin into a spin. Kevin's DNF'd 5 times this year, which is a huge amount for any driver on the grid, especially in this short season. So getting to the back of the grid probably wasn't a great start for him, especially as he only finished. Well, he did DNF at the end, didn't he?
Yeah, he retired because he had a headache. He had a headache. I think there was some kind of problem with his gear shifts.
They were quite violent, weren't they?
They have like a dual clutch on Formula One cars that's supposed to cause the sort of seamless gear shifts, but something must have gone wrong with it after his accident, perhaps. And he was having these like really sudden shifts when he was shifting up, and it was giving him a headache, he said, and he was basically last at the time. So I think he decided that enough was enough, and he wasn't going to get much more out of the race.
Safer to retire and keep the car off the track than it would be to continue going on. Speaking of retirement, I don't have any other notes up until lap 8. It was a bit of a procession.
Yeah, there wasn't too much going on at the beginning. We did see Bottas having a pretty strong early push, though.
He does, doesn't he? He's done that a couple of times.
He was setting fastest laps. He managed to get out of DRS range from Verstappen and within the first sort of 7 or 8 laps.
Yep, Verstappen carried on in P2.
Yeah, so it was at the beginning there wasn't too much going on. I did see the McLaren swapped. Sainz managed to get past Norris. But I think it was about lap 5 or 6. They were trying to make that one stop work. But McLaren are pretty nondescript in this race, which I was disappointed at. Didn't really see much of them because they
didn't have much coverage, did they, at all?
Yeah, then nothing really happened, unfortunately. They gained 2 places from the cars retiring in front of them and stayed there for the rest of the race. So
yeah, I mean, it was a very consistent race for them.
Not enough overspeed to make up any places.
No, which is a shame because that car's had huge amounts of development this year. And we've seen some really positive stuff from it. And I don't know if they've just ceased development until next year, but it's almost like the other teams have caught up a bit now. The AlphaTauri, the Renault have really almost jumped the McLaren in terms of performance. Hopefully next year. Go carry on.
What McLaren are doing is they're adapting. They're slowly trying to adapt their car in preparation for the Mercedes engine.
Absolutely, yeah.
So they're making changes, and they were making changes before in order to meet the homologation period, because of the token system and the like that's been brought in to change the way that the development is done, and etc. So they're making changes that, as I understand it, are meant to help the development of the car for next year, for when they have this Mercedes engine, because they've kind of changed the front. They've changed their front nose concept a couple of times in the past few seasons, and they've been trying out these new front wing packages. And as I understand it, it's designed to.
It's designed for the Mercedes engine, isn't it?
What's going on with their new engine? And
Yeah.
It's been unfortunate because in many ways the car developed, like you say, they'd come a long way and a lot of work had been put into it. But then it became necessary for them to make these changes to meet that. And Sainz was saying, I think it was after possibly the Nürburgring, he was saying something like he was struggling with the car and that he basically was dealing with less downforce because of the way they'd adapted the car. So so that's why they've not really gone too far in the last few races. They've kind of, if anything, looked like they're going backwards development-wise. But I have faith that it's all for next year.
Absolutely, yeah. And hopefully we can, they'll come into next year very strong because they've put the time and effort in halfway through this season. I mean, I say halfway through this season. It's mad to think that actually next year's season will start in March, which is now 4 months away, or just over 5 months away, really. and we've not even come to the end. I know we get to this point every year. We've still got 5 races left, and it's November the 2nd that time recording. But it feels crazy that next year's season is going to be starting in 5 months, given that we've only just had this season start. And hopefully we have somewhat of a normal season next year, which is nice in some sense, but I'd also like a bit of a mix-up like we have had this year. We've had some absolute brilliant races. Don't want to get too sidetracked.
Before we move on to any later laps, I think we have to give a shout out to Giovinazzi, who once again manages to just get past so many people in the starting phase of the race. He does it again. He started from dead last, but he was up 6 places by the end of the starting phase of the race.
That's really impressive.
It's great stuff from him, and he really does seem to just understand how to race in all that traffic. So fair play to Giovinazzi, and a good weekend in general for Alfa Romeo, seeing as they started. Giovinazzi was last, and Raikkonen was 17th, 18th,
and they finished 9th and 10th.
They were both in the points. So
brilliant piece of team radio from Raikkonen's engineer after the safety, just as the safety car was pulling in, mentioning that Raikkonen was P11 and they had to go hunt down P10 and we can score points. And then Russell spun out in front of him, and the engineer was like, "Well, that was easy, P10."
Yeah.
So I thought, oh, that's a little bit of humour. I don't think Kimi replied at all. Or it certainly wasn't broadcasted, but
For what?
For what have I done?
But yeah, good weekend for Alfa Romeo, and
really good weekend.
Giovinazzi, great start.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic.
So your next note, you said you were up on lap 8 or
lap 8, like, and then it was the unfortunate, and it was one of the few tweaks we did pull out this weekend. It was Gasly retired due to a terminal engine issue, which would result in a catastrophic fault, and it was just heartbreaking. One of many heartbreaking moments this weekend, unfortunately, to see a driver who seemingly had fantastic pace was keeping was keeping P4 well within his reach. It was his to take home, and didn't really seem to have any problems on track at all. There was no signs that his engine was giving up or anything like that. But as far as I'm concerned, and what I've read into it, is they noticed something on the telemetry. It was done to be a terminal issue, and what they wanted to do was box the car before any kind of failure, keep the driver safe, keep the engine in one piece, and unfortunately look at the issue and start again for the next race. But
it was a coolant leak, I believe.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, I think it was a coolant leak, and it's kind of questionable for that Honda engine, another engine-related issue possibly, because Verstappen had an issue in qualifying where he almost wasn't able to get out, some kind of electronics issue that the Honda
Did he not have an issue in the race as well?
In.
I believe Verstappen had an issue in the race. He was reporting some loss of power during the race. It went away, but for a lap or two.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, he did report not having enough power.
Yeah. Honda's not been in the sport for much longer, so it won't be a problem.
Yeah, so it was kind of questionable for them. And of course, the last race, Gasly had his car. It wasn't during the race, but he had his car, on fire.
Of course, yeah, and that was
before
obviously
he was able to put in his qualifying lap. So
yeah, not good. So Gasly, having some problems with that Honda engine. Hopefully, they can iron it out for next year. When do Honda leave? Is it 2021?
It's the end of 21. Yeah,
it's the end of 21. So they're secured in for next year.
Got one more season to go. Yeah,
one more season. Could be a good season. That engine's done really well. To be fair, I mean,
the performance of it is good. They do seem to have potentially some reliability issues, but
they're way more reliable than what they were. When McLaren was the only adopter.
Please don't make me have to remember McLaren Honda days.
Oh, blimey, that was just... I
want to think about it.
It was such a dark time, wasn't it? Such a dark time. So moving on, we've done lap 8. Gasly has retired. We've all said our piece. What have you got next?
So very unfortunate for Gasly. Obviously, he's out. Then we kind of get into the stage where people start pitting, especially those that are starting on softs. Bottas and Verstappen pit, and Hamilton starts pulling away, unsurprisingly.
Yeah.
We also have both McLarens pitting for mediums. They're trying to make a one-stopper work on those mediums, but it didn't really work, did it? For them.
No. Russell also pits on lap 12.
Yeah.
Good pit stop.
Yeah, it's kind of, again, this is a period of race, the kind of middle after the pit phase. Not loads going on. Again, very difficult to overtake. We did see there's an earlier phase of the incident that we should mention as well, where Stroll gets a little bit too close to Ocon
Yeah.
and knocks his front wing off and has to pit. Basically ends up at the back and doesn't really make much progress after that. And Stroll, I mean, you mentioned before that he's kind of gone a bit off the boil since the driver announcement and that Perez is leaving. Stroll has now not scored a point since his podium at Monza. That is not good for Racing Point if they want to be fighting for third.
In a car where the other driver is doing consistently well, as well. That's really bad, actually. I didn't know that statistic, so thanks for bringing that up. But Monza was a while ago, and it was like 3, 4, or 5 races ago, actually. So that's crazy stuff. In a car which really should be scoring points every single weekend without fail, it's got the pace to do so, without a doubt, and it's shown that time and time again. So Stroll seemingly off the ball at the moment. Needs to get his stuff together. Needs to rethink, regroup, and get back in the game for the next race.
Yeah, just a few too many sort of little mistakes that are just spoiling it for him. Like, obviously there was his incident with Norris before that we mentioned. Was that in the last race? I can't even remember. All the races always feel so long ago.
Yeah, it was with Norris. Yeah, because Norris said some things.
But then here he comes into the pits, and we saw there was that incident where he sort of knocked over the front wing jack.
Oh yeah,
operator, and that could have been nasty. And he said that he had cold brakes and the like, but it's just little things like that where you just think somewhere his head is not completely in the game.
Yeah, and you can't afford to relax. You can't afford to get your head out of the game. You can't have an off day, because if you're having an off day, you're putting yourself at risk, putting other drivers at risk, you're putting your crew at risk, which is what we've seen. We've seen it a couple of times in this sport over the last couple of years. You had a Ferrari mechanic who was properly injured and took the year out because he'd broken a couple of bones when I can't remember who came in, but I think it was Kimi potentially who came in and
it was
got caught up. But it happens. But you just got to make sure you're 100% all the time. And at the moment, Stroll doesn't look like he's currently giving it his all.
And it's a shame because he has put in some good performances. I mean, I know there's a lot of, I guess this feeds into maybe what you want to say later on, but there has been a lot of criticism of the guy for his position and, his dad owns the team or whatever. But the guy has put in some quality performances, but has just not quite hit the level that he needs to hit in order to make the most of that Racing Point, which is clearly a good car. And I think they must be desperate to get that last little bit of percentage of performance out of it in order for them to properly fight for third and maybe even beyond. But Stroll, since Monza, has been letting them down a little bit, I think.
Yeah, well, more than a little bit. It's been dreadful. Let's be honest. If you haven't scored points since then, it's not been what the team needs, and it's a cutthroat sport. And he's probably lucky he's in the position he is in, because he's not going to lose that drive for next year, where other drivers are at risk of losing a drive, and they're getting points or not.
Perez, on the other hand, doing
a fantastic job.
Yeah, he's doing a great job, but he was also very much greatly aided by Magnussen going longer on his tyres, because Magnussen, he had his accident, but then he went quite long on the set that he was on, and kind of held up quite a few people that were in that area that Perez was in, which meant that after they had boxed, Perez was basically kind of like free to go through and ended up with what looked like a, pretty likely podium if he just kept it together.
Yep.
And we saw later on in the race that Racing Point, for some reason, decided to box him, which basically cost him the podium.
Yeah.
I just couldn't understand why they did that. It just seemed like all he had to do was stay on his tyres, but they boxed him for softs for some reason. I couldn't understand why that was. That was under the safety car that they boxed him. But he didn't need to. He could have just stayed where he was and seemed pretty set to get a podium.
A lot of drivers did stay exactly where they were. Some drivers chose to box, some drivers didn't. It was an odd one considering the position he was in. Maybe they thought that he wouldn't come back out as far as he did, but
so question marks. Yeah, question marks at Racing Point, just because partially what's going on with Stroll, but also, I think they made a bit of a strategic error with this pit stop, and I couldn't for the life of me understand why they were doing it. Just leave Perez where he is. He's an experienced enough driver to be able to hold on to those tyres and hold on to that position, and threw it away. And you could hear on the radio afterwards that he was not very happy, understandably.
No. Yeah, which is understandable. So moving on, next on the list is it was almost a race of two halves, wasn't it? Or two thirds. The first third was the opening race laps. The second third was a bit procedurally generated. It was a bit stagnant, and then we had a pretty good last 10, 15 laps, or maybe last 20 laps. It was caused by multiple different people, but it was interesting nevertheless. So what have you got next, Alex?
So just coming out of the pit stop phase, then Albon was also looking for an overcut, I believe, to try and get past Leclerc. But that didn't work.
Nope.
And then he just wasn't able to get any closer. Leclerc just constantly just seemed to be that little bit too far ahead. He wasn't getting into DRS range. Albon just not making any progress. But yeah, then we have the period that you mentioned. There's kind of this middle section of the race where not a whole lot is going on, fairly unremarkable. So I think the next thing is that we have Bottas dealing with some kind of floor damage, it seems. What's happened is that after the incident possibly the one with Vettel and Magnussen, a piece of the end plate of Vettel's front wing has come off, hit the floor of Bottas's car and damaged it, and then lodged itself in some.
It just
part
got
of the
stuck in there,
board.
didn't it?
Yeah, and he was suffering a fair bit of performance loss. 50 points of downforce was supposedly what he was losing. So when you look at the rest of the performance for Bottas, and with that in mind, it's actually
very good performance.
It's actually a really good performance by Bottas. I mean, he had a couple of mistakes in Ravazzas, which caused Verstappen to get past. But otherwise, considering what he was dealing with, it's a very good drive from Bottas, and he just can't catch a break. This
I
poor
know
guy.
that
Sometimes
guy can't.
he legitimately just does not do what he has to do. But this is another one of those.
He did nothing
where,
wrong this weekend. Nothing wrong at all. He drove well, and like you said,
he should have won really
with the damage he received. I was surprised that wasn't picked up on any TV feed, because we heard it over the radio. Oh, Bottas, you've got significant aero damage. I'm like, what, does he? Car looks fine. Like, he's been on TV a lot. Like, I've seen the car go slow-mo over a sausage curb, and it looks absolutely fine, from the right-hand side. But it was a sizable bit of wing. And they are contrasting colours as well. We're talking about a black Mercedes and a bright red Ferrari end plate. Yeah. So that was properly embedded into his car. And like you said, 50 points of downforce. That would explain maybe why he was struggling on the final two turns, going off into that gravel, which obviously gave Max that opportunity to send it, I quote. But yeah, looking at it, he did very well to finish P2. Unfortunately, it was just picked up. He picked it up on lap 2, didn't he? So obviously Vettel had that collision with or that tap with Magnussen, and his end plate probably came off that lap, and then Bottas went around the next lap being the lead car, and there it was, just embedded in his car. It's a bit dangerous actually if you think about it. I mean, that cars traveling at that speed, you've already mentioned how well they throw it around this track. It's quite they're high downforce cars. They were literally throwing it into every corner, going quite wide, carrying as much speed as they could. If that had hit any other part of the car or his helmet, we've seen foreign objects hit drivers in the head before, and it's caused problems. So how that wasn't picked up is a bit surprising. Along with when the safety car was out and the lap cars were released. But there was marshals still on the track for Ocon, I believe it was. Was it Ocon who caused the safety car?
So the Ocon incident is about lap 30. Some kind of mechanical issue.
Yeah.
Something wrong with his clutch. He was reporting. He has to pull over to the side. Now, this later causes a VSC that is very, very favourable for Hamilton.
Extremely favourable for Hamilton.
Yeah. So the Ocon pulls over. They don't bring out the VSC straight away, I believe. They only bring it out when they actually go to retrieve the car. Because it's not like it's on fire or anything like that, so they don't have to immediately get out and start, putting a fire out. So Ocon pretty quickly gets out, and then they go to retrieve the car. Then the VSC is called. And it just happens to coincide with when Hamilton is about to pit. This is sort of lap 31, just as he's about to approach more traffic as well.
Yep.
So
it was perfect
it's
timing.
just an absolute gift for him. As usual, there's people trying to claim like this is some sort of conspiracy and that they're doing it to favour Hamilton.
Oh, blimey.
They don't need to do that.
Yeah.
They don't need to give him favourable VSCs in order for him to win the championship. You're not paying attention if you think that they need to do that in order for him to win.
That's crazy. There's still people out there who think that's happening.
Yeah, so it's just very fortunate. Sometimes that's what happens. You need a little bit of luck, compounded by the bad luck that Bottas had that we've just discussed. And it's also around this time that Hamilton passes having led over 5,000 laps.
That's incredible.
Over 5,000 laps in the lead of a Grand Prix.
And when you think about it,
not too far off Schumacher.
Like a race this was quite a long race. It was 66 laps. Obviously, Monaco, I think, is longer. But 5,000.
5,000.
Incredible stuff. Yeah, incredible stuff. Another statistic which was brought up that weekend, and I was like, I had no idea that was a thing. But fair play to you. Absolutely amazing stuff.
Yeah, so the VSC was out for the Ocon incident around lap 30. Then we have, around this time, we should probably point out that Vettel has been showing some really consistent race pace throughout this race. Yeah, he's been really struggling this year, and Leclerc's been doing so much better. But as I mentioned earlier, experience really counted for a lot in this race because it's a track that people aren't that familiar with. And Vettel, he was really doing quite well. He was in P4 at one point.
Yeah, he was.
But he still needed to pit, so he knew he was going to do that. But he was going to come out with a very good chance of points.
Well, Latifi was in P7 at one point.
Latifi was in P6 at one point.
Yeah, I thought it was.
I was like,
again,
what's going on, Latifi?
I was like, this could be it.
He hadn't boxed.
No, but it looked good. It looked good.
So Vettel in a strong position, just needs to pit and come out and hold his position. He could have been maybe sort of P8, P9.
Yeah, could have got a couple of points.
Some reasonable points.
Yeah.
Except he completely botched his pit stop.
They did, didn't they?
Left rear came off too slowly, and so the left rear went on late, and then the front right was
just jammed, didn't it? It's stuck.
It just couldn't get it on.
Yeah. The gun kept on failing.
Points evaporated with that, basically.
The team game at the end of the day.
He was quite gracious on the radio.
I didn't hear his radio. What was it like? What was it like?
I think he was just saying, it's a shame, but don't worry about the pit stop. And he was thanking somebody, possibly just a member of the pit crew who maybe was leaving. I don't really know exactly the story behind it. It sounded like he was thanking somebody.
Yeah. He's a nice guy, Vettel. He doesn't have anything horrible to say about anyone. He's just a genuine nice guy.
He's got a winner's mindset. I mean, this is a 4-time world champion we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. People forget that. People forget that he's a 4-time world champion.
People forget.
And the championship was harder fought back there, may I add.
When he won in 2010, he wasn't leading the championship until the last race.
And it always went down to the last race. They had 4 years where multiple teams were winning, and it went down to the last race. And some last races were way more favorable than others. Like you said, sometimes he approached the last race not winning the championship and done so. So fantastic driver. Like I said, arguably closer championships than what Hamilton's had to deal with, where Hamilton's just probably had to deal with his teammates so far. Vettel had to deal with a lot more. I'm not taking anything away from any of them. Please don't quote me saying something like that.
Vettel in that, there were seasons in that Red Bull where the car just absolutely dominated. So I guess he kind of had a similar period to Hamilton as well. Maybe not quite as prolonged as it has been for Mercedes.
Yeah.
Vettel just very unlucky in this race. He put in a genuinely pretty solid performance and it was ruined by that pit stop.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. It's a team sport. Win and lose together.
It happens. Oh, very nice quote there. Hamilton fan. You Hamilton fan?
Best fans.
Best fans. We have the best fans here. The grandstands are empty, mate. I'm joking. So we've already touched on it before. K-Mag, seemingly with a massive headache. Don't really hear it from drivers talking about personal issues in the car. But he felt
sometimes they mention cramp, don't they?
Cramp a lot, yeah. I think Bottas mentioned cramp early on in the season as well. A couple of races in.
Hamilton has too.
Hamilton has as well. And obviously someone, I think, what's his name?
Grosjean hurt his finger.
That's the one. Grosjean hurt his finger. So I can't see it on my list of things. But yeah, Kevin Magnussen had a headache and said, yeah, it's my job to drive. I'm going to drive. And then retired a couple of laps later. So I think, like you said, car wasn't in the points. Do you really want the extra mileage? This is probably just over the halfway point of the race, going on to lap 40-ish. retire the car, give him some paracetamol, job done. Start packing up. You can help with the pack up.
So then roughly around sort of 42, 43, something like that, Verstappen, who has been, getting up behind Bottas this whole time. Bottas, obviously, as we mentioned, suffering with loss of downforce. Verstappen finally gets the move done. Bottas makes a bit of a mistake in the Ravazza, and that's what Verstappen needs to get close enough in the DRS zone to get through. Finally gets up into second place.
Really good overtake.
And then what? About 10 laps later,
he
just suffers from this huge
tire failure,
like a puncture or something.
And like the tires
exploded.
Let me just mention that the tires are not meant to do this. Like, we've had problems in the past where tires have just given up, but they've been towards the end of their expected lap life, or how long they've been run for. But the tire was in great condition. It's not a very abrasive track, and it just went. It didn't, like, I watched the replay from the rear of his car, from the car in front behind him. It didn't show any signs of giving at all. It didn't deflate, didn't lose any pressure. Because if it did,
it wasn't like he was suffering loads of graining or
exactly.
All this sort of stuff.
Like if the tire had a slow puncture, you can guarantee the engineer would be onto the driver saying we've got a slow puncture on the back right, on the rear right, but nothing like that at all on the transcript. In fact, the engineer was talking to Max about modes and the deficit he had to Bottas, or a deficit he had to Hamilton, and he ended that conversation with, "Oh, we're off."
Yeah.
I was like, so it just came up just out of nowhere. Could have been a lot worse, to be fair. The gravel trap slowed him down quite quickly, but if that had been, run off like in Russia, for example, where there's no gravel at all, it's just run off and then Tech Pro barriers, or other tracks where there's limited runoff, probably would have gone quite hard into the wall through no fault of his own. But
it would have been a big one.
Ironically, the gravel was the best option for him, and I know it's been discussed recently over the years whether we should be having gravel at tracks anymore because the cars dig in and potentially would roll, but did the job. Stopped his car, didn't roll, he got out safely. Was probably a bit annoyed about it, but
it's very circumstantial, I suppose. I'm sure they've done a lot of studies on it. What is overall the best option? But in this particular case, gravel seemed like the best thing to have there. And
absolutely.
Fortunately, bad news for Verstappen, because it now means that all three of the races in Italy he's
DNF'd.
He's DNF'd. So
it's not good. But don't worry,
his country of choice for racing. Clearly,
Alex Albon's holding the fort. He's up in P6 at the moment, so I'm sure we'll get some good points.
At this stage in the race, Albon looks, because I remember in the typical thing on the Sky Sports thing where they insist on bothering the team principals in the middle of a race.
Yeah.
And they were saying, "Oh yeah, well you've got Albon still out there doing a job," basically asking questions that we can already see the answers to because we're watching the race.
Yeah. So what's Albon's plan? Well, he hasn't boxed, so he's going to drive fast and hold off the cars behind him. All right, cheers. We'll come back to you in 5 minutes.
Thanks for that, Christian.
Yeah, thanks for that, Christian.
Really.
We'll come back to you shortly.
Do they think that he's going to reveal the secrets of their strategy, live on air?
They don't go to Gunther Steiner anymore, do they? They just give up on him. And they haven't gone back to the Racing Point team principal either, because he said last week was like, I'm a bit busy now. The cars are racing. I'm busy. Christian Horner is the only guy who seems to have time.
It's a very diplomatic way of saying, can you leave me alone, please?
Can you leave me alone?
To do my job here.
Don't see Toto getting involved, do you?
No.
Not at all. Not in the middle of a race.
No, I don't know. I wish they wouldn't do it. At least they've not got any more of the fan videos anymore.
And
at least they've done away with that.
Don't talk to me about that. I will bring it up again, I promise. But why cut to him as well with a picture? Hold on a second. I'm paying to watch racing here. I'm paying a lot of money, Sky Sports F1, to watch your channel. If I want to see Christian Horner, I'll Google a picture of him, overlay his audio on the picture if you have to, or do picture-in-picture like I so favourably agree with. Like, we've had some really good picture-in-picture segments of the race. Don't put his whole face on the TV. I want to watch the racing.
Here's a picture of Christian Horner looking very exasperated because you're asking him questions.
When he should be focusing on the race and the strategy and pinning all his hopes on Alex Albon. But safety car comes out.
Somebody obviously thought that was a good idea.
Oh, I know. So safety car comes out to retrieve Max Verstappen's broken vehicle. I was going to say, I don't know how else to describe it. It was a catastrophic failure in the tyre department, which is a shame. which kind of answers my question from last week's podcast. Will Max overtake Bottas in the championship? Probably not now. Not many races to go. He's got a bit of a deficit. We'll find out how much of a deficit he's got later on in the podcast, so stay tuned. But yeah, safety car comes out.
But
it's not impossible.
Not likely either.
Lewis can still lose the championship, but that's all done. So safety cars come out. Cars start to line up, start to get closer together. And Alex, take it away.
What we have with the safety car at first is the obviously cars that decide to box and ones that don't, and some of the ones that do include Perez, as we've mentioned.
Yep, bad call.
Who at this stage is sitting in P3 and looks pretty on set for a podium, and just utterly bizarre call. I think they tried to justify it later on. I can't remember exactly what they said, but I don't remember it being very convincing. And then
very political, wasn't
it? We also have a couple of cars coming in for softs. I think the most important thing to talk about, though, with the safety car, as you've already mentioned before, is that Russell is being told, at this point he's in P10.
He is in P10.
He's sitting pretty for some points. And his engineer
is on old
the radio.
tyres, may I add. He's on old tyres. So he didn't box, did he?
He was on softs.
Okay, maybe he did box then.
So I think he did box.
Okay, carry on.
But he maybe... I can't remember exactly when he pitted, but I'm pretty sure he was on softs when this happened. But anyway, he was basically being told by his engineer that he needed to keep the temperature in the tyres in order to have an effective restart. And so Russell is there sort of, giving it the heavy brakes and then putting it back
quick
on.
throttle, yeah.
And it just makes a mistake, just gives it too much and
man.
bins it under a safety car.
Now, man.
He has a bit of a moment out of the car. It really reminded me, and I think Martin Brundle mentioned this. It kind of reminded me of Hakkinen at the Italian Grand Prix in '99, where he was leading the championship, and he selected the wrong gear going into one of the chicanes and just careered up the road. Had some tears by the side of the road, and that was kind of what Russell very much looked like. He was asking the marshals to leave him alone.
Leave him alone. Yeah, a moment of reflection.
Binning it under the safety car is understandably an action that genuinely results in people being quite derisive, because it is a bit of a rookie move what he did.
Yeah.
But I can only hope that he will come out of this, like you say, a bit of reflection, and he'll come out stronger, because let's not forget that. Don't forget when Hamilton binned it into the gravel trap in the pit lane in China.
Yeah.
So
and this is what I wanted to talk about, and it's just the public's reaction to and how it differs from driver to driver. A couple of years ago, we're racing at Baku. There's a safety car. Grosjean loses it and bins it in the wall. And that guy got so much hatred. He was, it's a tight track, almost as tight as, as Imola. Tight track. He's warming up his tires. He's getting his brakes up to temperature, and he bins it, puts it in the wall. And he was slated, absolutely slated. Bottas done it last year in Silverstone. Spun it, didn't break anything, but spun it under the safety car. Again, the guy got absolutely slated for it. What's he doing? You can't bin under the safety car. Russell does it. He gets a whole heap of support. And I love support.
Don't forget Verstappen nearly binned it completely under during the installation lap as well.
Oh, very true. Yeah, he did. And again, probably got negative feedback for it, but it was just, and I'm all for positive feedback. I'm a massive, positive attitude kind of guy. And it was nice to see everyone get behind Russell, because it clearly bothered him. He chucked away potentially his first points. He chucked away what could have been what would have felt like a win for him. It was good to see the whole community rally up, and support him. A couple of drivers did as well. Roman Grosjean, really nice segment. He was the first driver of the current grid to comment on an Instagram post, and it was really nice to see him support, mentioning that Russell's got years ahead of him. He's only starting his career, and actually everyone makes mistakes. Hamilton dropped in a couple of hours later and said exactly the same thing, which was really nice. But I just find it bothers me how we all rally up against one driver and give him all the support in the world. Someone else did the same thing 3 years ago, and he was the worst driver on the grid. It just bothers me. And don't get me wrong, I prefer this outcome where everyone is nice and happy, but you can look at it both ways. He's a young driver, a couple of years in Formula 1. Everyone makes mistakes. Or this is his 38th race now, I believe. It's a 36th or 38th race in a Formula One car because he's out-qualified his teammate the exact same amount of times. And he'd been under the safety car. Very easy thing, very, very silly thing to do. Probably had a lot of pressure. I don't have a full-blown conclusion about what happened, but just wanted to mention the disparity between drivers and their fans, and it's just it's not very nice sometimes when you go all out on one driver and call them an idiot and the worst driver on the grid, and then someone else who does it a couple of years later is completely innocent and is forgiven straight away.
Yeah, it's very easy to have a very sudden knee-jerk reaction to these things. In the case of Grosjean, I mean, he's been a target of people hating on him for a long time, and it's a shame really, because whenever you see him in interviews on the track, he seems like a really decent bloke.
He does actually, doesn't he? He does seem like a nice
really nice guy.
Yeah, but he has been in the sport a lot longer.
Yeah, exactly. He's been in the sport a lot longer, and he's had his fair share. I mean, he's caused accidents, and he's like we've already mentioned, he's done it under the safety car. There's that time where in Spain, where for some reason he lit up his tires while cars were coming around.
Yeah,
turn three, and it's like, come on, mate, people need to be able to see what they're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's had his moments for sure. I mean, it's not that we shouldn't criticize those moments, but this is a guy who's got on the podium in a car that was perhaps not like the strongest car on the grid, and he showed good performances. This is a guy who has been in a long time in Formula One for a reason. He's definitely a good driver.
He's out in his place. Yeah, absolutely.
And he's been struggling with poor machinery over the last few seasons. So,
and he's not been vocal about it at all. Can we just appreciate that he's been in a Haas for the last couple of years, and only on a couple of occasions has he mentioned that there's a slight downfall. We're a little bit behind target. It's not quite what I want. Up until recent times. Oh, Alex. For those of you who are listening on audio, Alex is...
I'm not sure I agree with you on that one.
Throwing a couple of faces at me.
Yeah, no, I don't agree with you. This comes somewhat into the same conversation where you're talking about people being criticised or perhaps not receiving the right kind of response. It's often talked about that drivers have a lot of, certain drivers have a lot of capacity when they're racing. They can race and they can talk at the same time. Verstappen is one of them, for example, when he was talking about have you remembered to hydrate and all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And other drivers, they don't want to do that. They want to focus on their racing. Don't talk to me. Romain Grosjean has incredible capacity for whinging whilst driving. He is definitely a whinger. Like, he is always complaining about, like, don't you remember when he was like, I think we should retire the car. I think we should just retire it. Like, that was like the circuit of the Americas in 2017, 2018?
Yes, I remember.
He definitely whinges a lot in the car. I mean, I'm happy to put that down to just adrenaline and frustration. And yeah, this is a good driver who's driving a car that's not really all it's cracked up to be.
All right, okay, I retract my statement. He's open and honest about the car performance.
but what you're saying is important, because what you're saying about sort of hating on the drivers instantly for every mistake they make, I guess like you, I'm always much more leaning towards having a positive attitude, because I don't see what can be gained by being hateful towards the drivers.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And I think what people underestimate...
What are we supposed to get out of this other than a completely undeserved sense of self-righteousness?
There's a lot of drivers on the grid who have not raced for very long. I've only been in the sport for a couple of years, and the amount of physical and mental pressure they are under is ridiculous.
Colossal.
Like, I'm not discrediting like the top three of this race. We've got Hamilton, Bottas, and Ricciardo, all race winners, multiple times on the podiums. I've had the range of feelings from up and down. Don't get me wrong, they're used to it. You got people like Norris, Giovinazzi, Latifi, Albon. Can you imagine the pressure Albon's in at the moment? I think he's quite young. He's early 20s, and he's currently bounced from team to team. He's racing in a top team, clearly, and he's admittedly underperforming. And yet every week he gets hated on over and over again. And, Potkill Black, I've not said the nicest things about the chap in the podcast. I've just mentioned how much he's underperforming. But that doesn't take away the huge amount of pressure he's under, and probably his mental capacity. You're talking about capacity within the car. It's probably drained, absolutely drained. So let's try and fill these drivers up with positive vibes instead of negative.
There's a crucial difference between commenting on a performance and saying that this just isn't quite good enough for what it needs to do, and trying to be constructive, or just trying to be earnest about your opinions on whether or not a performance is good enough or not, and talking about drivers as if they're just some resource that can be discarded at will. Like, just get rid of him, he's useless, and all this sort of stuff. And
what I want to see from
it's not
the
a
community,
constructive way of talking about anything, really.
what I want to see from the community moving forward, and this is, what the podcast is really about, is community engagement, admitting when you're wrong, talking about, facts. Let's not talk about rumors. That's really, I could go on forever. Lando said some controversial things last week, put out an apology statement and publicly apologized for what he said. And I think that's the kind of guy I want leading this sport. A guy who at the heat of the moment will say whatever is on his mind. And that's what we want. We want to see raw reaction. But actually, if he realizes a couple of hours later, when he's calmed down, he's out of the car, that it was a bit controversial and maybe he shouldn't have said what he does, lets the people know that actually he understands what he said was wrong and he apologizes and he'll learn from it. Crack on.
And a lot of these guys are young as well. I mean, when I was that age, I was
so young.
I was impetuous and said things that I didn't mean.
I'm still that age. No, I'm joking. I'm like 5 years older than some of these guys.
It's kind of scary to think that quite a lot of these drivers are, a few years younger than me.
Yeah, and myself. It's crazy.
We have to kind of give them the benefit of the doubt. The level of the sport they're at, a lot of them are still pretty young. Lots of adrenaline pumping. The incredible amounts of pressure they're under. Like, let's try and have a sort of realistic expectation, an impression of the drivers, because being nasty to them is just not getting us anywhere. But I don't know. It's part of what we're complaining about is people being nasty on Twitter, which
is always going to happen.
That's not new, is it?
No.
People nasty on the internet, surely not.
That doesn't happen. But we'll move on. We went off on a bit of a tangent there, but it's good to talk about these things. It's what the podcast is about. It's like, we talk about what's on our mind, and I like to see a positive attitude on the social media. And luckily, the people we follow on the Race Per Minute account is a lot of positive vibes. So Russell had the potential for points, and unfortunately blew it. There's no easy way to talk about it, and it's not the first time it's happened. We've seen it happen a couple of times before. Germany last year, where he spun out, and Kubica got a point. Had a couple of times, once or twice this year, where they've been close, 11th and 12th, just not quite there. It did worry me actually when I was watching this race, and I was watching this race after a long day shift at work, that Russell had retired and Latifi was sat in P11, so we're moving on with the race now. So safety car's gone in. Restart. It's gone all well. No one's completely stacked it. There was a bit of controversy around that the lap cars had went back round at full racing speed to catch the back of the pack, and there were marshals still on track. It was like scenes, from the 1990s, and I was like, I know we're at that old track, but let's not put the people's safety at risk. But Latifi for a long time.
Just that incident, going back to that incident you mentioned with Stroll and the being released under the safety car. I think there seems to be a couple of things as far as I can tell. I think there's something of an investigation ongoing, but they released the cars, then they had the double waved yellows that were going on. But I don't think Stroll kind of slowed down enough. He seemed to be going pretty full throttle.
It did seem like almost a full racing lap.
But under those double wave yellows, and I think it was still meant to have significantly slowed, and he didn't. And when you look at that onboard, it was pretty scary. Like, it was pretty close.
Yeah,
I don't really want to lean too hard on Stroll here, because I don't know. Maybe his race engineer should have said to him, like, you need to calm it a little bit here. You're supposed to be under double wave yellows. Drivers usually tend to have quite a lot of focus on what they're doing. They want to get everywhere quickly. Of course they do. They're racing drivers, so.
Yeah, that wasn't
I don't really
a dig
want to
at.
lean on fault there, but
it wasn't. I wasn't by any means trying to say it's all Stroll's fault. I was just talking about the situation as a whole, and that for whatever reason it happened, and it definitely shouldn't be in today's age. With the technology we have, it shouldn't happen for whatever reason. I've not even looked into it, but there was a car on track, went past Marshall pretty fast, pretty close. Not in 2020. Thank you very much. There's a lot of accidents in the sport. They don't need to encourage more. So like you said, safety car restart. Take it away.
So another important incident about somebody making a bit of a fatal error was, of course, Albon.
Blimey.
Perez is able to get past him on the restart.
Really good overtake, to be fair.
Perez does really well here to fight
really
there.
Clean overtake up the inside of one corner and then on the outside of another. And with the two McLarens following close behind, Sainz being the first one, Albon almost did exactly what Russell did. Put his foot down on the throttle a little bit too soon, lit up the rears, and just did a 180, almost a 360 pirouette, ended up on the grass facing the right direction. And I tell you what, Carlos Sainz, how he avoided that spinning Red Bull, I do not know. Incredible stuff. That guy, smooth operator. Fair play to him. Because I would have put money on that they had touched. There must have been less than an inch between those drivers. Which
on the onboard, it doesn't even look possible that he should be able to stop. But
it's almost like
somehow.
he just clips through the driver. But I'm glad that Sainz managed to avoid that because he's had unlucky retirements this year or been in some unlucky places at the start of the season. For him to finish up in P7, get some good points for him. So I'm glad he didn't collect that Red Bull. But back to the Red Bull, Alex Albon, all the hopes pinned on him, spun it back down to P15, box the next lap for some fresh softs, going for fastest
lap. Trying to set
the
fastest lap.
Trying to take it away from Hamilton or Bottas. Failed to do so, actually, didn't he?
Yeah, it didn't really get that close.
With a clean track, he
wasn't even faster than Bottas's faster lap.
No. Maybe picked up some damage. Don't know. But massive shame for Alex Albon. Do we want to talk about it?
There's not too much to say here. One thing that is interesting is that his engineer sounded, or perhaps tried to sound unsure as to whether or not something had hit him, because Albon was like, I felt like somebody hit me, and he was still felt like that way when they were interviewing him after the race. His engineer didn't really do anything to put this idea out of his mind. He was like, I don't know, we'll have a look, can't tell. Surely they could see that.
Oh, you've got sensors all over that truck. Sorry, that's work. You've got sensors all over that car.
So I don't know if they were just trying to keep his head up, and it's interesting that they were doing that. It shows that they are still trying to support him.
But also, it's exactly the same as in the Nürburgring when he had to retire. Alex was like, "Why?" And I said, "We'll tell you when you get back to the pits." They're maybe just shielding him from.
Perhaps. I mean,
slightly embarrassing team radio
that they did. I believe that they pitted him legitimately. I've
retired
him
absolutely.
legitimately there.
Absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, I think that they have given him certainly better support than they gave Gasly. At the very least. Because I remember the Gasly team radios where they were like, you need to hurry up, get on with it.
Yeah,
that's helpful.
Yeah. What do you think he's trying to do?
But yeah, I not too much to say about Albon here. We all, we know that it's not good enough. We know that he's been struggling. I still think that Red Bull could surprise us and keep him in that seat. I still think it's possible.
We're going to find out soon.
Beyond the realm of possibility.
Do you think we'll find out before the season ends?
I think I'm just going to take a quick look at Twitter, just in case I have to eat my words immediately.
I tell you what, it's happened a couple of times, hasn't it? We've been recording this podcast, we end it and go, oh, George Russell's confirmed for next year. Blimey. Yeah. Or, oh no, I'll tell you what it was last week while you're looking on Twitter. It was Kimi Räikkönen. You were mentioning how you'd quite like him to relinquish his seat for a young driver to step up, as Kimi finds it more of a hobby than anything else. And then as soon as I came off the podcast, it was like Kimi Räikkönen and Joe Vinazzi confirmed for next year. I was like, I'm just going to clip that bit of the podcast and loop it over and over again.
But it wasn't like I said he wouldn't be. I just said that I would be disappointed if he was.
Absolutely. And I think you tagged Alfa Romeo in, didn't you?
Remake that video and put lots of arrows and air horns on it and proclaiming how terribly wrong I was. And
yeah. Probably our most viewed video.
Right. So yeah, then we have we just have kind of the closing few laps of the race. We absolutely have to give a shout out before we move on to our closing sections. We have to give a shout out to Kvyat, who we've not mentioned yet,
but has done a brilliant job.
Yeah, he had a very solid race. He qualified pretty well. He started 8th. He was just gifted 2 positions by Verstappen and Gasly ahead of him, having DNF'd.
Yeah.
But then on the restart, he takes Albon and Perez as they're fighting on the main straight. And then shortly after takes Leclerc, who's still on his old hard. So it ends up in 4th. Not too much to say about the rest of the race, other than that he was solid and kept it together. He was chasing Albon at one point and doing a pretty good job of putting him under threat. But otherwise,
he gave it a good go, didn't he, for P3, but wasn't quite
not
fast
quite
enough.
There, yeah, but that restart was mega, very, very good restart, and another good result for AlphaTauri.
Yeah, really good result.
Obviously, they were down Gasly. Yeah.
nevertheless, really good result for them.
And Ricardo, he really was kind of gifted that P3, really. But he had to put in the performance to keep himself there, and he absolutely did. And
he qualified P5, stayed out of trouble, and gained 2 positions in the
qualifying
P3.
lap was immense, yeah.
But he
didn't really. It wasn't like he was, bristling with on-track overtakes. He just kind of kept it together for the race, and that was enough.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is what you got to do. Sometimes you just got to get it done.
Much as a part of staying out of trouble, staying on the track and keeping your head cool than it is making all the overtakes. Doesn't matter that 2 drivers in front of him retired. He kept it cool and he did his job.
P3 is P3.
P3 is P3. And another podium. Holy mac and cheese, which is my favourite team radio of the weekend. Holy mac and cheese. That's another.
Does this mean Cyril has to get another tattoo?
I don't know. But if he's not careful, he'll be walking away fully tatted by the end of the year.
Yeah, it's going to be like
quite
sleeved up.
Yeah, exactly. Can you imagine? Like it's just like the guy from Prison Break, Michael Schofield. It's a whole sleeves done up to the neck. Maybe it's a good luck charm betting on a podium. But that pretty much finishes it off. Apart from Hamilton crosses the line and Mercedes become 7-time constructors world champions. God damn it, I did it wrong. But 7 times.
Consecutive as well.
Consecutive.
7 times in a row. Not just 7 times, but in a row.
That's incredible stuff. I mean, it was always going to happen.
And there's never been any doubt.
Oh, no. After the first couple of races in the year, we thought, I'll tell you what, it looks like Mercedes are just as dominant as they were last year and the year before, and the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that. Oh, and did I mention the year before that as well? That's how many times they've done it. It's crazy. And just like Hamilton, the team have got better and better and better. They've got it easier and easier every year. It just seems that it's just coming to them. Like I said, that was either 5 or 4 races towards the end, and they've won it. There's still hundreds of points left on the table. Considering max points for a weekend, 26 plus 22, 23 or 20, can't remember. But say there's 85 points per weekend. Still got 5 races left. About 400 points left on the table, and yet they've won it. So congratulations to them. Great celebrations. It was
thoroughly deserved.
Absolutely. They've even changed their Twitter handle now to Mercedes AMG Petronas open bracket 7-time World Constructor Championship close bracket, and being re-verified. So fair play to them. Just epic stuff. Absolutely epic stuff.
Right, that's the race then. So we'll come to our closing section here with our driver of the day and our championship standings. Now, I'm a little bit torn on driver of the day because there's some good performances today.
It's a tough old one, isn't it?
It is difficult because a lot of the drivers that put in on paper very good performances were also unlucky not to really get much out of it.
Well, I'm just looking at the top couple of drivers on, the top finishing positions. You've got Hamilton, did it right in the pit stop phase and managed to, overtake Bottas under the virtual safety car. You got Bottas, who did a good drive, finished second, but was gifted second probably because Verstappen DNF, so he can't get it. Ricardo was gifted 2 positions, and I know we've just talked about, you've got to stay in the game, but it's not driver of the day material for myself if you're starting 5th, finishing 3rd, and the 2 people in 3rd and 4th DNF. So it's a hard old pick today.
Yeah, I think though I'm gonna go with what I think was the popular vote and go for Kimi Räikkönen. Because Räikkönen did a mega stint on the tyres that he had. He started like 18th and ended up in 9th. Yeah, his mega stint really helped. He had the experience to keep that car together. I mean, I think if he, obviously they didn't know this at the time, but if he had stayed out just a few laps longer, he could have pitted under the safety car.
Yeah.
And finished even higher. So in terms of an outstanding performance, and Giovinazzi has to come close as well because he started last and ended 10th.
Yeah,
those 6 places on the opening lap helping immensely. Just in general was very positive for Alfa Romeo. So yeah, I think I'll go with. I'm pretty sure was the popular vote and go with Kimi Räikkönen. That's the standout performance for me.
I respect your decision, but I disagree. I think if there was a team of the day.
Well, that's not allowed. You can't do that.
Oh my goodness, it doesn't happen on the podcast. If there was a team of the day, it would be easy to go with Mercedes.
I'm going to flame you on Twitter now.
Oh my goodness. You're going to be horrible to me.
People still say that? It's flaming sort of thing?
I don't know. Maybe. But yeah. Team of the day is almost easier to pick than it is than driver of the day, because Mercedes obviously the Constructors World Championship, and Alfa Romeo did a fantastic job because both cars went from the back of the grid to in the points. But I'm going to give my driver of the day to Latifi. And do you know why? Because he started 19th and he finished 11th. So he's gained 8 positions. Yes, a couple of cars DNF, but one car started behind him. But he didn't spin in a track where he hasn't driven before. He kept it together, kept his head cool, and finished less than a second behind P10. I think that's a pretty good performance, if you ask me. Probably one of his best. I don't know what his best...
And he did a big stint as well.
He did do a big stint, and I don't know what his best finishing position is. I'm going to try and ramble on and find out, but it's got to be one of his best. Did an absolutely cracking job, and I'll quite happily give him my driver of the day.
I think he's come 11th once.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so we're going to touch on this. So driver of the day is Latifi for me. Austria, 11th. Italy, 11th. Imola, 11th. Not bad standings for the new boy on the track. Just comparing him to his teammate. And Russell has only finished 11th once.
Yeah,
interesting.
There's like key moments where Russell has kind of lost it when he's had that opportunity.
Russell's DNF 4 times this season.
Yeah,
he's also finished 12th once or twice, so it's not too bad.
With his results, I think Latifi, the first race, Austria, he came 11th. I can't remember the full circumstances that surrounded
There was a
that,
lot of retirements. It was the vibrations of the track. Cars were falling apart.
With Italy, obviously, there was a certain amount of luck involved with the way that things panned out with the safety car and the restart and all the rest of it. But again, you've got to have the consistency to keep it together. So those 11ths are kind of matched up with quite a few 19ths and 18ths as well. But
of course,
yes.
I
think we've pointed out that Latifi certainly at the beginning of the season had a propensity to spin quite a bit, especially during the practice sessions, and was, in terms of overall race pace, has been pretty unremarkable. But yeah, as we mentioned earlier with Ricciardo's result, sometimes you just stay out of trouble and keep it together, and that gets you where you need to go.
Just remind everyone, it's not driver of the season. That's yet to come. It's driver of the day, and on the day,
it's driver of the day.
On other days, he would not be driver of the day because he started 19th and finished 20th, or spun out and put himself at the back of the grid. But today, started 19th, finished 11th, was less than a second away from points. Pretty damn good day for Nicholas Latifi. Fair play to him.
Yeah,
that's my driver of the day.
I hope that he does sort of improve a bit, and it's just good for Williams. Yeah. It is good for Williams. I mean, finishing 11th last year would have been
shocking.
Would have been magic.
It's just that team has come a long way this year. It's come a long way this year, and hopefully next year we start to see some major improvements.
Yeah,
or going into 2022. So let's talk about the championship standings then, shall we?
Yeah. Let's take a look at these standings. So not too much to say about the constructors' standings initially, because obviously Mercedes have won.
Yep.
And nothing can change that now. 479 points puts them way out of anybody else's reach. But not only is the battle for third place extremely exciting, as we tweeted about earlier, with just 1 point between Renault, McLaren and Racing Point.
It's getting juicy, isn't it?
It's getting pretty exciting. And not only that, though, is that Ferrari and AlphaTauri are in contention for that as well. They're only a few good results away from getting into that mix too.
Are hot on the heels.
They could overtake Ferrari at this stage.
If Gasly had finished this race, they would have been a handful of points, 5-6 points away from Ferrari, which would put Ferrari 7th in the championship.
I think they will.
It's a shame we didn't.
If I were a betting man, I think I'd say that the Ferrari might finish 7th.
Well, I think next year what we'll do is before preseason testing, we'll do our predictions, and then after preseason testing, we'll do our amended predictions and see how it pans out. Because I don't think any of us
horribly wrong we are.
None of us would have put Ferrari in P6 in the constructors championship. constructor standings, especially with
Yeah.
Alfa Romeo so close. But it's so tight, isn't it? We've got an absolute ding-dong battle going into the next 4 races. 1 point separates 3 teams for 3rd place. Oh, it's going to be so good. I can't wait. I get excited at this point in the podcast every time, and I just want to watch the next race like right now. It's a tough one. But further down the grid,
Still a lot to play for.
Still so much to play for. No team can relax apart from Mercedes, who have done the job, can pretty much stop turning up to the races and they'll still win.
Well, Hamilton needs to win his he needs to win his title first. I mean, that's also pretty much a given. But
we could be having a different conversation this time. In 2 weeks' time, I believe this is the next race. We'll be saying Hamilton's won it. Bottas has come second. Let's wrap it up. They don't have to turn up for any more races. Let's race it out for best of the rest. But at the bottom, Williams again, still no points. Came close on 2 occasions. Obviously, Russell was in the points and Nicholas finished 11th, so could have got points this week. Haas still on 3. Alfa Romeo, a couple of points there on 8, so they're not doing too bad. They've definitely cleared it from Haas. Haas would have to have a pretty good 5 races to finish ahead of Alfa Romeo now. And then you've got AlphaTauri. It's impressive how close it is from 3rd down to 8th. Talking 50 points, not even that. 46 points between 3rd place and 8th place. That's a decent constructor standings right there.
Well, here's hoping for those new regs and they all develop together and we end up with a massive...
it's going to be incredible.
5 or 6 way title fight.
So let's move on to the 2020 driver standings. Lewis Hamilton, 282 points. Bottas hasn't even reached the 200 mark yet. He's on 197. He is almost 100 points away from his teammate. Which is not good. The only other driver of that much of a difference is Verstappen and Albon looking down the grid, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah, almost exactly 100 points between them, isn't it?
I tell you what, it's incredible that Albon gets so much rubbish for not matching up to Verstappen's finishing results, but there's 100 points that separates both those teams from their teammates. Bottas is almost 100 points away. He's 90 points away from Hamilton, and Albon is pretty much 100 points away from Verstappen. So interesting stuff. Both those have the same.
That seems to be true for quite a few teams. I mean, you've got Leclerc on 85 and Vettel on 18. You've got Gasly on 63 and his teammate Kvyat on 26. You've got Ricciardo on 95 and Ocon on 40. So it seems like quite a few of the teams have got a bit of disparity between their drivers.
Grosjean has got double the amount of points Magnussen's got. That's crazy, true, isn't it? Does that mean he's twice as good? I don't know, it works out well.
Of course it does. That's exactly what that means.
That's exactly
There's no other conclusion to draw from that.
Raikkonen and Giovinazzi on identical points. That's quite nice, isn't it? They can go into next season equal partners going forward. Hulkenberg holding the fort with 10 points. Damn it, he's going to finish 15th. He's only raced 3 races and couldn't start one of them. What a guy. But let's talk about how close it is. So from Ricciardo down to probably Stroll. So from 4th to 11th, 30 points away from each other. That can all change in 4 races' time. It really can. We're talking like 10 points per race. It's not out of the question.
Just one McLaren, 1-2, and that's it. It's all over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, one McLaren, 1-2.
The dream.
Oh, can you imagine? That'd be so nice, wouldn't it? And then they would almost pip Ricciardo, to be fair. But you've got Norris on 69
a lot to play
points.
For in that midfield.
Sainz on 65 points. So inter-team battle right there. That's all to play for. Yeah. Albon sat comfortably at 9th with 64 points, smack bang in the middle of Gasly and Sainz. Gasly with 63 points. They're consecutive at the moment, 63, 64, and 65. And then you've got Stroll on 57. So a handful of points. We're talking one DNF could change a lot of this. It's crazy. Or one less DNF would make it so much better. Where Gasly would be sat if he hadn't DNF'd this race. Probably up into 7th and not sat in 10th like he is now.
Above Albon.
Above Albon, yeah, which is interesting. We'll leave it like that. Right, guys, so thank you very much for listening to the podcast. This has been it's not the Imola Grand Prix, Alex, is it? What's it called? You tweeted this earlier.
It's the Emilia Romagna.
There we go. Perfect. I'm going to get you to do that every week, but in the correct accent and the correct You make sure that all the thumbnails are spelled correctly. There's so many times where I design a thumbnail and Alex is like, "Can you redo it, please, but spell it right?" Anyway, off on a tangent.
Well, I don't know why. I'm kind of glad they haven't called it San Marino Grand Prix, actually, because it's not even close to San Marino.
I saw you comment on someone's tweet about this.
Don't understand why it's called that.
But yeah, guys, thank you very much for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, please consider giving us a subscription. So subscribe to our channel and leave a comment down below on anything we've mentioned on the podcast, and we'll be sure to get back to you. We've got notifications turned on when you comment, so you should turn notifications on as well when we post videos. Give us a rating and a review for wherever you get your podcast. So Apple Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts. I think it's not on Amazon. I'm not sure if it's on Amazon, but various amounts of platforms out there. So please give us a review. It really makes us feel great. Just getting those 5-star reviews or the thumbs up. Honestly, it means the world. If you've got anything to say or got any comments, then you can contact us on Twitter at RacePerMinute. One of us is always on there tweeting and responding to comments. And normally you'll get a response from 2 RacePerMinutes. It's usually Alex's response and then my response. And sometimes they can be slightly different, but it makes the questions all the more interesting. And if you've got any questions and fancy recording yourself, video or audio, you can email us at info@raceperminute.com. And we can put your face on the screen, or we can just play your audio file over the top of the podcast. Either way, we don't mind, but we just like to hear what you guys have to say. And if you really like the podcast and love what we're doing, consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/raceperminute. We have multiple tiers, and they start at £1 per month. So for the price of a cheap Starbucks, you can support us, and then we can put that towards server costs and other boring stuff to keep this podcast up and running. But that's pretty much it.
And you can join us on Discord and
absolutely
all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, you can join us post-race or watch qualifying along with us. It would be great to have some more people come chat to us during the sessions. But thank you very much for listening, and we shall join you next time, which I believe is the Turkish Grand Prix.
Yeah, in a couple of weeks' time. Istanbul Park.
Should be a good one. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.
See you then.